On a cold corner of a crowded American city, beneath the shadow of tall buildings and the rush of passing cars, a boy danced. He was barefoot. His skin was dark, his hair short and dry, and his frame thin like a whisper carried by the wind. His name was Noel. No one knew where he came from. No one asked. People only saw his movement, the rhythm of his body, the lightness in his steps, the sorrow in his silence. Every day, Noel stood by the same cracked sidewalk, just beside a bakery that never let him inside. With his arms stretched and eyes closed, he let the wind guide him. Each motion carried a weight too heavy for his small shoulders. He danced not for joy, but for coins. Not for applause, but for survival. Noel was not just dancing. He was remembering. Though he had no pictures, no names, and no voice to tell his story, something inside him always pulled him to that street, to that sidewalk, and to that same melody. He hummed in his chest, a tune no one else knew. Sometimes people paused. Some gave a coin. Others just stared for a moment before walking away. But one afternoon, something shifted. Among the faces that blurred like passing clouds, a woman in gray with trembling hands stopped longer than most. Her eyes were wide, her breath hitched. She was not watching a dancer. She was seeing a memory, and she was not alone. A man stood behind her, young, tall, dressed in fine clothes. His eyes narrowed as if something about the boy's face struck a chord buried deep in his heart. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But his chest rose with a weight he did not understand. Noel kept dancing, unaware that his small feet had shaken something in two strangers' hearts. His body twisted through the air like a leaf with nowhere to fall. The wind followed him. The sun watched silently. And behind him in the shadows, someone else stood further back. Someone whose face was hidden. Someone who had been watching Noel for days, saying nothing. As the evening faded into a cold blue sky, Noel fell to his knees. Not because he was tired, but because something inside him suddenly felt empty. He didn't know why. But a part of him sensed it. Something had begun, and far across the street, behind the dark glass of a black car, a phone buzzed. A voice whispered, "Quietly, we found him." But Noel could not hear that. He only felt the wind growing colder, and he did not know that someone had just unlocked a door to a past he never knew he had. The next morning, the city opened its eyes with the sound of horns and hurried feet. But for Noel, the day began with silence. He had slept curled beneath a broken bench near the alley. The cardboard beneath him was wet. His shirt clung to his skin. Hunger wrapped around him like a second skin. Still, as the sky brightened, Noel rose. He walked barefoot to the sidewalk where he always danced. His body ached. His stomach screamed. But none of that mattered. Dancing was the only thing that reminded him he was still alive. As he moved again to the rhythm only he could hear, the crowd gathered like every other day. Most came and went. Some dropped coins, some looked away. But three people remained, hidden, watching. The woman in gray stood across the street, her eyes red, her hands shaking. Every step the boy took brought tears to her eyes, as if the dance painted echoes from a life she had lost long ago. She clutched an old photograph in her coat. It was torn and faded, but clear enough to show the face of a baby with the same nose, the same eyes, the same skin. Beside her, the man in fine clothes stood still. His name was Elijah Brooks, the only son of a powerful businessman. He had never believed in fate, never trusted feelings. But something about the boy felt familiar. Not the face, not the movement, something deeper. Something that reached into the quiet corners of his soul, pulling at a thread he didn't know existed. And behind them, in the shadows near the bakery's back door, stood the stranger in black. He had watched Noel for weeks, always from a distance, always silent. He knew the truth. Not because he had guessed it, But because he had caused it, Noel continued to dance. He remembered flashes. A woman singing in a different language. Warm lap, a lullaby. Then fire, screams, running, being lifted into a car, darkness, and after that, only cold floors, rough voices, and doors that never opened. He never knew who he was. He never knew what he had lost. But that day, as the wind picked up and the sky turned gray, Noel suddenly stopped. His body froze mid-step. His chest tightened. A sharp pain rushed through him, not from hunger, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. As if something had been pulled out of place inside his chest. From the corner of his eye, he saw the woman in gray. Their eyes met. For a second, the city vanished. It was just him and her. Her lips trembled. Her knees gave way. And before anyone could stop her, she fell to the ground, clutching the photo, whispering something Noel could not hear. Elijah rushed to her. The crowd scattered. And Noel ran. He ran not because he was guilty. He ran because fear had always followed love. He ran because his heart was pounding with a feeling he could not explain. And far behind him, the man in black pulled out a phone again. He remembers, the voice said on the other end. And now, there would be no turning back. Noel did not know where his legs were carrying him. He only knew he had to get away, from the woman with the photograph, from the man who rushed to her side, from the feeling in his chest that felt too big for his small heart. He ran through back streets, past trash cans and flickering neon signs, past the corner store where the owner never let him inside. He did not stop until the sounds of the city faded behind him, and the only thing he could hear was his own breath, heavy, broken, afraid. He hid beneath a stairwell behind an old laundromat. The air smelled of soap and metal. His body shook, not from the cold, but from the weight of something he could not name. His mind flashed back to the woman's eyes, how they looked at him not with pity, but with recognition. It was the kind of look no one had ever given him before. Why? He pressed his face into his knees, trying to push it all away. But in the shadows nearby, someone had followed him. Not the woman, not the young man, the other one. The one in black. From behind a rusted fence, the man watched. His expression was unreadable, but in his hand was an envelope, thick, sealed, and old. Inside it was the story no one had told Noel, a story of a boy stolen from his mother, of an adoption that never happened, of records erased, and a name that had been hidden for 9 long years. But that envelope was not for Noel. It was for someone else, for someone who thought the past had been buried forever. Far across the city, in a tall office with glass walls and marble floors, a man stared out the window. His hands were clean. His suit was perfect. But his soul was stained with decisions that still whispered in the dark. His phone buzzed. The voice on the line said only one word: found. The man's face did not change, but his eyes narrowed. He turned slowly toward a locked drawer in his desk. Inside it were documents he hoped never to see again. Papers with a single photograph, a baby boy with wide eyes and brown skin, wrapped in a faded red cloth. The same baby who now danced on the streets, the same baby he once called an inconvenience. He did not speak, he did not move. But his mind raced. That boy should have disappeared. That boy should have never come back. But he had, and now, everything could unravel. Back in the alley, Noel slowly raised his head. His fingers clutched something in his pocket, a silver button he had once found under the bench where he slept. He did not know why he kept it, but now it felt important. Familiar. He stepped out into the light again, and as he did, across the street, the woman in gray appeared once more. She was not alone. This time, she held something in her hands, a torn red cloth. Noel stopped. The wind blew, and the glass office, high above the city, began to feel colder than ever. Noel stood frozen on the edge of the sidewalk, his eyes locked on the red cloth in the woman's trembling hands. The color matched something inside him, a flicker of warmth he had almost forgotten, a memory he could never place but always felt. Wind blew harder that morning. The streets around him faded into a blur, but the cloth remained still, as if time itself had paused. The woman stepped closer, her face pale, her eyes swollen with the weight of too many yesterdays. But Noel took a step back. He didn't know what this meant. He didn't know why his chest felt tight again, but somewhere inside, something whispered, "That belongs to you." The woman knelt, laying the cloth gently on the sidewalk as if she were placing a piece of her own heart. She did not speak. She did not move further. She only watched, like someone who had waited for a miracle that never came, until today. Noel couldn't move. He wanted to run, but his legs were heavy. His hands were shaking. He looked down at the cloth and slowly, without thinking, he reached for the silver button in his pocket. He didn't know where it came from. He didn't know why he kept it, but as he held it up to the cloth, the button fell from his fingers and landed exactly on a stitched corner, a perfect match, like it had never been apart. Gasps came from the small crowd gathering nearby, but Noel didn't hear them. His breath caught in his throat, his fingers trembled, and suddenly, memories began to flash like broken glass in his mind. Woman singing. The feel of warm arms, the sound of drums in the distance. Fire. Running, then darkness. He stumbled backward, clutching his head. It was too much. Too fast. The woman cried out softly, but never moved. She knew he needed time. She had waited 9 years. She could wait a little longer. From a rooftop above, the man in black watched. He held the envelope tighter now. Not yet, it wasn't time. Far away, in the glass office, the man in the suit stood before a wall safe. He entered the code with shaking fingers. Inside was a journal. Inside that journal, a single name was written in red ink. A name the world had forgotten. A name buried to protect a reputation. A name that belonged to a boy who now danced alone in the street. Noel, a Johnny Quinta. He read it again, then closed the journal slowly. It was happening. The past was rising, and nothing could stop it now. The sky turned gray above the city, as if the clouds themselves felt the weight of secrets stirring below. That afternoon, Noel sat on the edge of an abandoned playground, away from the sidewalk where his dance had drawn unknown eyes. His chest still ached from what he had felt earlier. The red cloth, the silver button, the woman's tears. He didn't have words for it. Only a feeling, like something once stolen from him had brushed his fingertips and vanished again. He held the cloth close, pressing it to his chest. It smelled faintly of something warm, something familiar. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. But he did not know that elsewhere, a door had just been opened. Inside a mansion lined with polished wood and cold silence. The man in the suit sat at his desk, the journal open before him. The red ink stared back at him like blood. Noel Johnny Quint, he remembered that name. He remembered the day a decision was made to erase it. Years ago, the boy had been taken from a refugee camp after a fire. There were no records, no surviving relatives. And for a man who needed to keep his image clean, for a man building a company built on perfection, the child had become a threat. So the name was removed. The child was never claimed. The past was sealed. But now, he was dancing on the street for the world to see. And people were watching. The woman who had nearly fainted, her name was Zuleika Quint. She had searched for her sister's child for nearly a decade, crossing oceans, knocking on doors, chasing whispers. She had held on to nothing but a torn cloth and a prayer to Allah. And now, after 9 long years, the prayer had led her to that sidewalk. She had no proof. No Paperwork. Only her heart. But it was enough. She had gone to the city records office that very morning, asking for help. Showing the button. Showing the cloth. Asking for the truth. But truth in that city had a price. And someone was already working to make sure that truth stayed buried. The man in black, watching from rooftops and alleys, received another call. Destroy the journal, the voice ordered. But he hesitated, because deep down he had once known the child too. Long ago, before the orders came, before the lies, before the hush money, he had held the baby in his arms once. Heard his cry, seen his eyes, and now those eyes were back, dancing alone, searching for a name. That night, Noel returned to the sidewalk. He didn't dance, he sat quietly, and without knowing why. He looked up. A man was standing across the street. Not the woman, not the rich one. Not the man in black. This one was new. He wore a suit. He carried a cane. And in his hand was the journal. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, but for Noel, time moved differently now. He sat still on the cold sidewalk, his eyes fixed on the man across the street. The stranger didn't move. He only stood, one hand resting on a silver-handled cane, the other holding a journal, old, leather-bound, and weathered with age. It looked like something forgotten. Like something that had no business surviving this long. Noel didn't understand why his heart began to beat faster. But deep inside him, something stirred, a quiet recognition, like the echo of a lullaby sung long ago. The man crossed the street. Slowly, his eyes never leaving Noel. With each step, the noise of the city seemed to fade. Noel's breath grew shallow. The air felt heavier. When the man reached him, he didn't speak. He only looked down and extended the journal. Noel didn't move. He stared at the worn object, unsure what it was, unsure if he should take it. But his hands moved anyway. The leather was cold in his fingers. The edges frayed. The smell was strange, part dust, part time. He opened it. And there, on the first page, written in deep red ink, were the words, Ajani Kint, born in fire, lost in silence. Noel blinked, his breath caught, his fingers trembled. Page after page, the story unfolded, not in full sentences, but in fragments, dates, and names. A woman named Sophia, a boy who survived a blaze, a private transport, a payment, a closed record, a new identity. Noel flipped faster, eyes wide. He saw a small photograph, pressed between the pages, curled at the edges, faded with time. It was him. As a baby, wrapped in a red cloth, the same red cloth he held in his lap now. Behind him, someone was watching. The woman in gray, Zuleika, stood silently across the street, her hands clutched at her chest. She had followed the man with the journal, hoping he had found what she could not. Now as she watched Noel open that book, tears spilled down her face once more. But someone else was watching too. From a dark sedan parked down the block, the man in the suit sat in the back seat, his face shadowed, his jaw tight. His empire had been built on forgetting, on control, on silence. But now a boy with no shoes held the truth in his hands, and the silence had begun to crack. Back on the sidewalk, Noel reached the last page. There was no ending, only one sentence scrawled in rushed handwriting. He must never know. But now, he did. And even though he did not yet understand all the names, all the faces, all the reasons, he understood this much. He was not nothing. He had a name. He had a story. He had been taken. And now, someone would try to take it from him again. The wind howled through the city that night, rattling windows and shaking the street signs. Noel stood at the edge of the sidewalk, the journal pressed tightly to his chest. The red cloth fluttered in his hand. His bare feet were numb against the cold ground, but he did not move. Behind him, the lights of passing cars blurred like streaks of memory. In front of him, the woman in gray stepped closer, not rushing, not speaking, but simply arriving, like a memory that refused to fade. She stopped just a few feet away, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. And though Noelle did not yet know her name, something in her presence felt safe. Her tears fell again, not from sadness this time, but from recognition. She opened her hand slowly. In her palm was a broken necklace, thin, worn, and dull. Noelle stared. And then, without knowing why, he reached into the journal and turned to a page he hadn't noticed before. Taped in the corner was a tiny photograph. In it, a baby with soft eyes held a charm in his hand, the same charm now resting in the woman's palm, the same necklace his mother had once worn. The crowd had begun to gather. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could feel the moment. Something about the boy, the journal, the woman. It pulled at them like gravity. Across the street, the man in the suit exited his black car. For the first time in years, his polished shoes touched the street without cameras or bodyguards. He walked slowly toward Noelle, his face hard, his mouth set in a tight line. But as he approached, Noelle looked up. He did not flinch. He did not back away. He stood still, eyes clear, heart steady. He had been alone in the cold. He had danced for coins. He had slept beside rats and lived off crumbs. He had known nothing but hunger, silence, and shadows. And still, he had survived. Now, the man who tried to erase him stood just a few steps away. Noelle clutched the journal tighter. And then, the woman stepped in front of him. Without a word, without fear, she placed herself between the boy and the man, like a shield, like a wall. Like the family he had lost and found all at once. The crowd watched. The wind stopped, and in that stillness, something shattered. The man in the suit turned his face away. Not because of shame, but because he knew. It was over. The silence would not hold. The truth had found its voice. And the boy would not disappear. As dawn broke over the skyline, Noelle looked up. The first light touched his face. His feet were still bare, his stomach still empty. But now, for the first time, he belonged somewhere. Not in an office, not in a file, but in someone's heart. He was Noelle Johnny Kint. He was remembered. He was seen. And nothing would ever erase him again.